We've been hanging around here in Ashton upon Mersey, working on that story I promised you. Mark from Aztec Drones kindly shot this stunning footage of St. Martin's Church for us. As I was watching it, I remembered another story, one you wouldn't expect to hear in a place like this. Buffalo Bill Cody? Now that's a name you wouldn't associate with an English churchyard. He was one of the most famous and well-known figures of the Wild West. Legend has it, Buffalo Bill Cody was here in 1888, and showman that he was, he put a bullet through the weather vane atop St. Martin's brand new tower. Now, even a half-blind vicar could probably make a shot like that. But Buffalo Bill did something far more remarkable. He supposedly did it back on, over his shoulder, using a mirror. It was a stunt made famous by his friend, Annie Oakley. What an odd story. It's a strange tale to be passed down through the generations. But the intriguing part is, years later, when the weather vane was taken down for restoration, there was a bullet hole. Now that might not sound so remarkable to an American. I mean, most weather vanes have bullet holes, don't they? But this is England. Even the police don't carry guns here. So why would I expect you to believe such a tale? How could it possibly be true? What was Buffalo Bill Cody doing in an English churchyard in Ashton upon Mersey? Well, as it turns out, there's something that makes this story more than just possible. Buffalo Bill was born William F. Cody in 1846. He wasn't just an ordinary cowboy, though. He earned his famous nickname during the 1860s after reportedly killing over 4,282 buffalo in an 18-month period, 68 in one 8-hour period. That's how he won the name Buffalo Bill. He and another hunter named Bill had a disagreement over the exclusive rights to the name Buffalo Bill. The other Bill only shot 48. Now, I can hear some of you screaming at me, they aren't buffalo, they're bison. But for the purposes of this video, we'll call them buffalo. After all, he wasn't called Bison Bill Cody. But he was much more than a hunter. He lived the full frontier life. He was a Pony Express rider, an Army Scout, and even fought in the Indian Wars, where he claimed to have killed the Cheyenne warrior Chief Yellowhair in a duel. His life on the frontier was the stuff of legend. In the late 1800s, Buffalo Bill turned that legend into an entertainment empire with his Wild West show. The show was a full spectacle, recreating the life and drama of the American frontier. There were cowboys, Native Americans, and live buffalo with sharpshooting performances from the likes of Annie Oakley and Calamity Jane. Audiences loved it, and soon Buffalo Bill's show was touring across America and then Europe. In 1887, his famous Wild West show crossed the Atlantic for Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee. He arrived with 100 cowboys, 100 Native Americans from tribes like the Sioux and Cheyenne, and 700 animals, including buffalo, horses, and even a bear. They performed for massive audiences in London, including royalty, and the show was a resounding success. But here's where our local connection comes in. After the London run, Buffalo Bill took his show north to Salford. A huge arena was specially built at the New Barns Racecourse to house the spectacle. It was where the Lowry is now. The venue seated up to 8,000 people, with standing room for 3,000 more, and for 5 months, from December 1887 to April 1888, Salford became the home of Buffalo Bill's Wild West. The official statement at the time was that the show was so popular that they decided it was better to stay in Salford throughout the winter, performing night after night to packed crowds in what was, at the time, the biggest indoor arena ever constructed in Western Europe. And in between all the action, Bill and Annie Oakley, Calamity Jane, and Chief Sitting Bull would showcase their sharpshooting skills, hitting targets from incredible distances. The performances were nothing short of legendary. The show featured reenactments of frontier life, like buffalo hunts, cattle drives, and stagecoach chases. There were dramatic scenes like the Battle of the Little Bighorn, and many of the Sioux warriors in the show were actually veterans of the Battle of the Little Bighorn, Custer's last stand, and they joined the show in Europe while they were on the run from the U.S. cavalry. Bill himself, always the showman, would ride in to save the day in the final moments of each act, while Annie Oakley showed off her incredible sharpshooting skills, sometimes shooting targets over her shoulder using a mirror, just like the shot at St. Martin's Church. It was a spectacle unlike anything England had ever seen. Queen Victoria was so impressed by the show that she gave it her royal seal of approval, and Buffalo Bill, ever the generous showman, would invite the children of Salford to watch the matinees for free. It was an unforgettable experience for the children to see real-life Native Americans, cowboys, and the wonders of the Wild West up close. So, with Buffalo Bill's larger-than-life presence just a few miles away, it's not so far-fetched to imagine him taking a quick trip to Ashton upon Mersey and leaving behind a little piece of Wild West history on top of St. Martin's Church. On the day before they were due to leave town, Bill decided to go on an adventure. Now that's code for an all-nighter, a bender, a tear, a 24-hour drinking spree, okay? He ended up at the Buck Hotel, and after the cabbie poured him into his lodgings on Howard Street, Bill refused to pay the fare. A scuffle ensued, and the cabbie ended up taking Bill to court. Bill didn't show, but he pleaded guilty and paid whatever the court saw fit. Now this might be why the council didn't name Broadway Buffalo Bill Way, and possibly why he didn't earn the freedom of Salford. However, the legacy of their visit lives on in Buffalo Court and Dakota Avenue. But Buffalo Bill's Wild West show in Salford wasn't just taking place on the stage. There was the birth of a baby girl, possibly the first Native American born overseas. And that's the name she was given, Overseas, and the English name of Frances Victoria Alexander. The Native American, or Sioux as people like to call them, were quite popular with the locals. With the local girls, I mean. I'm speaking in code again, if you catch my drift. There may be more than one offspring born to the Lakota or Salford Sioux, as they became known. The Wild West show came back to Manchester again, but not specifically Salford, in 1891 and 1902. So there were plenty of opportunities for Bill to be taking pot shots at weather vanes in Ashton upon Mersey. One of the Salford Sioux, Charging Thunder, did decide to stay. It's believed he was the only Native American living in the Northwest until he died in 1929. He married and changed his name to George Edward Williams and moved to Gorton. He has several descendants still living in the area. Before we wrap up, I want to share one more story. Another unexpected connection between buffalo or bison and Greater Manchester. While I was putting this video together, I was searching for footage of bison, and I remembered one of my favorite historical films, Dances with Wolves. If you've seen it, you'll remember those breathtaking scenes of buffalo stampedes. Back in the 1800s, there were around 30 million buffalo roaming the American plains. But by the late 1800s, that number had plummeted, and they were on the brink of extinction. In one of the most haunting scenes, the Lakota come across a site where buffalo have been massacred, killed only for their hides and tongues. John Dunbar, the main character, explains they were slaughtered for sport and greed. Now, the movie takes some historical liberties here. The mass killing of buffalo for hides happened a bit later than the film suggests, but it did happen, but not for reasons you might think. Now, here's where the Greater Manchester connection comes in. Where do you think all those millions and millions of buffalo hides went? What were they used for? Leather belts. So in a roundabout way, buffalo from the American plains were fueling the industry of Greater Manchester. It's strange to think that the near extinction of the buffalo wasn't just about hunting for sport. It was about keeping the gears of industry turning across the Atlantic. It's a sobering thought, but history is full of these unexpected connections. And while Buffalo Bill Cody played a part in the near extinction of the buffalo, in his later years, he became involved in efforts to preserve them. Hey, thanks for sticking around to the end. I can't believe you made it this far. I promise you that other story about Ashton upon Mersey is coming up real soon. But in the meantime, if you want to help us out with these little adventures and stories we tell, head over to wickedacorn.com. You could even become a member of the Brew Crew and get your name put on one of our Manchester Bee mugs.